Before anyone can be used by God in significant ways, they must first undergo a process of preparation. This preparation is not always easy, and it often involves enduring trials and challenges that refine and mold a person into who they are meant to become. Just as gold is purified through fire, our character and faith are refined through the difficulties we face. These trials are not punishments, but part of God's divine plan to equip us for a greater purpose. Throughout the Bible, we see examples of people who had to go through intense seasons of preparation before stepping into their God-given destinies. Joseph, for instance, was sold into slavery and unjustly imprisoned for years before becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt. Likewise, Moses spent 40 years in the desert before God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. In both cases, the hardships they endured were essential for their spiritual growth and ultimate success. The difficulties we encounter in life are not random or meaningless. They are intentional and designed to prepare us for what God has in store. When we face challenges, it is easy to feel discouraged or question God's purpose for our lives. However, it is during these moments that we are being prepared for something far greater than we can imagine. Just as Joseph and Moses had to trust God in their darkest moments, we too must have faith that our trials are working for our good. Understanding this process is crucial because it shifts our perspective on suffering. Instead of seeing our hardships as setbacks, we begin to see them as stepping stones to something more significant. God is more interested in developing our character than in giving us immediate success. He knows that without the proper foundation, we won't be able to handle the weight of the blessings He has planned for us. In conclusion, every challenge we face is part of the preparation process God uses to shape us into the people He has called us to be. Whether we are waiting for a breakthrough or going through a difficult season, we must remember that God's purpose for our lives is unfolding, and He is preparing us for something extraordinary. Just as Joseph and Moses emerged from their trials stronger and ready to fulfill their destinies, so too will we, if we trust in the divine process. One of the greatest tests in our journey with God is the test of our motivation. Why do we serve Him? Are we motivated by a genuine love for God? Or is there a deeper, hidden desire for personal gain? This is the first test every believer must face, the test of intention. God is not simply concerned with what we do for Him. He is deeply interested in why we do it. The heart, after all, is where true devotion is measured. In the book of Acts, we find a powerful story that reveals the danger of misplaced motivation. The story of Ananias and Sapphira. This couple appeared to be doing something noble, giving money to the apostles from the sale of their property. On the surface, it seemed like an act of generosity, but behind this seemingly selfless act was a desire for recognition and praise. They wanted to appear righteous while keeping part of the money for themselves. Their motivation was not pure. They sought glory from men rather than from God. When confronted by the apostle Peter, Ananias and Sapphira's deception was exposed, and their fate was a sobering reminder to all believers. Their story teaches us that God cannot be fooled. He sees through every facade, every false intention, and He cares about the condition of our hearts more than the appearance of our actions. Ananias and Sapphira failed this test because they put their own interests above the call to genuine, sacrificial love for God. This test of motivation challenges each of us today. Do we give, serve, and worship out of a pure heart? Or are we seeking recognition, approval, or material reward? It's easy to fall into the trap of doing good things for the wrong reasons. Yet God looks for those who serve Him in spirit and in truth, with a heart free from selfish ambition. True service to God comes from a place of love, not manipulation or self-interest. In the end, the motivation of our hearts will determine the depth of our relationship with God. Authentic love for Him is what He desires most. It is the foundation upon which everything else in our spiritual lives is built. When we pass the test of motivation, we are positioned to receive not only God's blessing, but His trust. Remember, God doesn't need our works. He desires our hearts. So let us serve with sincerity, seeking only to please Him, knowing that He rewards those who seek Him with a pure and genuine love. Trials are an inevitable part of the Christian life, and while they may be painful in the moment, they serve a much greater purpose. It is through these trials that our faith is tested and our character is molded into the likeness of Christ. The Bible reassures us in Romans 8:28 that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This promise doesn't mean we will be free from hardship, but that every trial we face has a divine purpose behind it. Trials have a refining effect on us, much like fire purifies gold. The difficulties we go through strip away the superficial, revealing what is truly important. It is in these moments that we see where our faith really stands. Are we anchored in God, or are we relying on our own strength? The process may be uncomfortable, but it strengthens us in ways we couldn't have imagined. As iron sharpens iron, so do trials sharpen our faith. Consider the life of Job, a man who faced unimaginable loss, his wealth, his health, even his family. Yet, in the face of these overwhelming trials, Job remained faithful to God. It wasn't easy. He questioned, he struggled, but he never turned away from God. In the end, Job's faith was refined, and he was restored, receiving twice as much as he had before. His story is a powerful reminder that trials, though difficult, can lead to greater blessings and deeper faith when we persevere. Another aspect of trials is that they help us grow in endurance and patience. James 1:3-4 tells us that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. It is through the persistent struggles that we learn to wait on God's timing and trust in His plan. Without trials, we would never fully understand the depth of God's faithfulness or develop the resilience needed to fulfill His purpose for our lives. In conclusion, trials are not meant to break us but to build us. They are God's way of preparing us for the greater things He has planned. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we should ask, "What is God trying to teach me through this?" When we embrace the refining nature of trials, we come out stronger, with a faith that is unshakable. God is always at work, even in the darkest moments, shaping us into the people He created us to be. Facing trials is one of the greatest challenges in the Christian journey, but the way we approach them can determine how we emerge from them. Trials are opportunities in disguise, meant not to defeat us, but to strengthen and refine us. When we change our perspective and see them through a spiritual lens, we realize that every hardship is a tool God uses to shape us for His purpose. Instead of seeing trials as barriers, we should see them as stepping stones towards spiritual maturity. It's important to remember that God often allows trials to reveal hidden truths in our hearts, truths we may not even know exist. Difficult situations tend to strip away the layers of our lives, exposing our deepest fears, doubts, and even misplaced priorities. In those moments, God invites us to trust Him more fully, to let go of self-reliance, and to lean completely on His grace. These trials are like mirrors, showing us areas in need of growth and transformation, areas where God's strength can be made perfect in our weakness. Consider how trials have drawn some of the greatest figures in the Bible closer to God. Think about David, who wrote some of his most profound psalms while fleeing from his enemies. In his darkest hours, he poured out his heart to God, expressing both his pain and his trust. It was during those trials that David's relationship with God deepened, and his faith became unshakable. His trials did not crush him. They elevated him to be a man after God's own heart. It is also essential to understand that trials are temporary. No storm lasts forever. In 2 Corinthians 4:17, the Apostle Paul reminds us, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." What we endure in the present is nothing compared to the glory that awaits us. This eternal perspective helps us to face trials with hope, knowing that God is using every challenge to prepare us for something far greater. Ultimately, the way we respond to trials can bring us closer to our divine purpose. Instead of asking, "Why me?" we should ask, "What can I learn from this?" Trials are not about what happens to us, but what happens in us. They are opportunities for growth, for spiritual maturity, and for drawing nearer to God. When we face trials with faith, endurance, and a heart open to learning, we align ourselves with God's perfect plan and step closer to the fulfillment of His divine purpose for our lives. As we come to the conclusion of this journey through trials, it's crucial to understand one thing. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of pain is a piece of a bigger puzzle. God doesn't allow us to walk through difficulties without a reason. He is always working behind the scenes, preparing us for a future far greater than we can imagine. Trials are not the end. They are the beginning of something much more significant. They are the training ground for the purpose God has laid out for each of us. Think about it like this. No one builds a house without first laying a strong foundation. In the same way, God is using trials to build a solid foundation in us, one that can support the weight of His future blessings. Without this foundation, the blessings could easily overwhelm us, or we might not fully appreciate them. But with each trial, God is strengthening us, molding our character, and preparing us to handle the greater responsibilities and rewards He has in store. Look at the life of Joseph once again. After years of betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment, Joseph was elevated to a position of power in Egypt. But had he not gone through the trials, he wouldn't have been prepared for that role. His trials taught him humility, wisdom, and perseverance. Similarly, the trials you face today are not meant to break you, but to build you. God is shaping you into the person you need to be to step into your future with confidence and strength. One of the most important things to remember is that God never wastes a trial. Every battle you face, every tear you shed, is being used by God to equip you for something greater. He doesn't waste pain. What you see as setbacks, He sees as setups for your future. In Romans 5, verse 3-4, Paul reminds us that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. Each trial serves a purpose, and that purpose is to prepare you for a life of deeper faith and greater fulfillment in God's plan. So as you face your own trials, take heart. Know that you are not alone, and that God is using every struggle to prepare you for a future far more incredible than you could ever dream of. He is faithful, and He will finish the work He started in you. Your trials today are preparing you for the victories of tomorrow. Hold on to hope, keep your faith strong, and trust that every challenge is moving you closer to the greater future God has promised.